Well, let's talk about your first paranormal experience. I think it was in the Catacombs in Paris.
And I had weird experiences, but nothing that I thought was like that. If that's a ghost. So it was 2003, and I was in Paris, France, and I went to the Catacombs, which is this network of tunnels below the city of Paris. There's just hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. And I went down, and it's deeper and deeper, and it's so quiet, and you can just hear the water dripping through the limestone. And I was making lefts and rights, and I knew what was supposed to be down there, but I didn't know where until I came to a doorway that said in French, stop. This is the Empire of the Dead. And I walked through.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quest, a journey into true crime and the paranormal. My name is Misti Gaither, and I am so excited to have with me Emmy nominated. Have we ever had Emmy nominated on the show? No, I don't think so. So this is our first Emmy nominated person on the show, and also author and a researcher and just all around cool guy, Jeff Belanger. Everyone, welcome to the show, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm great, Misty. Thank you for having me.
I was talking about, you being Emmy nominated, and you have the podcast, The New England Legends. You have,
Yeah, it's
and
a TV show and a podcast. Yeah.
right. And so you do that. And actually, I liked the recent episode that you and Ray did. It was Bicycle Larry, of how y'all
Yeah.
kind of combined the true crime and paranormal aspect of that. And that's what we like to do here sometimes too on some of the episodes, is kind of merge, because I just really think that they go together in more ways than what a lot of people think. What do you think about that?
For me, the basic recipe for a haunting is almost always unfinished business. And I don't mean unfinished business necessarily with the dead, although that's part of it. The unfinished business is most often with us, the living. So if, I live not too far from the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River, Massachusetts, two people were murdered with a hatchet, right? Back in, the 1890s, that happened.
Hmm.
And no one was ever convicted for it. No one was ever punished. That will haunt us. We don't like that, as a society. And so I think when that's the background, when there was never justice, when there's things left unsolved, it gnaws away at us. Even if generations have passed, it picks away, and we want answers. And that's where the ghosts come in. That's where the haunting comes in. It sort of fills in the gaps, and it reminds us that justice was not served. And of course, it could happen again.
And it will.
Yeah, it
Unfortunately,
has. Yeah.
and it does every day, and it's just a sad part about it. And, I really think that it's our responsibility to try to, in my opinion, to try to bring light to some of these cases that need help, and see what we can do, and maybe in a different format or a different tool than that's not normally used.
Well, sure. Anything that calls attention to a story, when there's a heinous crime, especially like a kidnapping or something like that, the people that get found are often those with family who are the most media savvy. It's a
Right.
sad fact, but the reality is, if you are good with the media, if you can get your plight out there and you can make people care, there'll be a lot more folks looking for your lost loved one than those that aren't that articulate, aren't that good on camera or with the media, and so on. And so the fact is, anything that calls attention, I think, is a good thing. And especially some of these stories, they're unsolved, and they're from maybe a population of people that don't get much attention. Even though, let's face it, the ghost thing offends some people,
Sure.
whether religiously or the implications, how dare you imply that my relative, my descendant, is still sort of, stuck on earth, which I don't buy into that personally, but other people do. And that, that offends some people. But I think anything that sort of brings that story back to the forefront is important. We say their names again. We relive the nightmare because we don't want it to happen to us. We don't want it to happen to others. And we want to find some sort of closure, even if it's just, something a little more paranormal than tangible.
It makes me think of the saying, that you die twice, when you first die, and then it was three times.
Three times.
And
You
then
die three times.
and then when the last time your name is said, and then what's
That's
the third?
No, the first time is when your heart stops. The
Right.
second time is when you're laid into the ground.
Okay.
The third time is when your name is uttered for the last time. And that's an old Mexican proverb, and it's beautiful and it's important to repeat because I think about uh, I think about my relatives who weren't murdered or anything like that. I think about grandma and grandpa and stuff like that, and I still say their names, and they're still with me in a very real way. But I recognize that eventually enough generations will pass where I don't say my great great grandparents' names, never met them, didn't know them, hardly know anything about them. So there is this sort of thing that time passes and they sort of drift away. But we're all made up of who we came from and where we came from. And I do think it is important to say the names, and that includes of the dead. And when you say it, they're still with us in a very real way.
Right, I totally agree with that because that's, it's just important to, that's what we try to do here is bring, attention to some cases that aren't as popular or, I was thinking about you and that you are probably just like a walking encyclopedia of all things, of all cases, of all hauntings, all, locations. I mean, you've ghost adventures over what, almost 30 years when
Well,
since you
no,
were
no. So it was 2008.
Six-
So
six-
16 years I've
16
been
years.
working on
Okay,
that show.
almost, yeah. So
It's
almost
a long
20
time.
years like since you
Yeah.
were 10. No,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's
So,
funny. So Ghost Adventures,
yeah.
I mean, that was so I've been working on the show since the first episode in 2008, and it was just supposed to be 8 episodes. That's all that was contracted, and we were like, okay, we can do that. It was something new, it was different, and then a bunch of people watched it, and it looked like we had a hit. And they said, "How fast can you get back to work?" That was it. That was the last day off, 2008. It's great. I love that. It's always a challenge, to bring a fresh perspective to some of those old cases and some of those old haunts. And that's the challenge of all this, right? Is how do you make these stories still relevant and interesting today?
Well, the first episode, if I remember correctly, of Ghost Adventures was Bobby Mackey's, which kind of is full circle because they're like tearing down the bar, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, so many investigators, so many shows have been done inside Bobby Mackey's. Not really like a competition, maybe a little bit, but is your responsibility to kind of find new places, or do they find them before you do, and then you research, or do you kind of do both?
So back then, I did everything.
Okay.
When those first few years, really, I was the one finding the locations, doing all the research, finding all the people that would come on camera and share their stories. I knew Bobby Mackey before Ghost Adventures. I knew Bobby Mackey when he didn't believe in ghosts. Now, let me clarify. He would say, I don't believe in them, but I'm not calling the people around me that my friends, my and coworkers and so on. I'm not calling them liars, but I just really haven't had the experience. And whether he came around based on all the revenue it brought in, or or based on the just maybe being there long enough and tuning into it. You know what I mean? Maybe it's one of those things you don't think much about until you just start paying attention. But somewhere along the way, he really had become convinced. And he'd already written the song Johanna, which was about
Yes.
their ghost. Cool song. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought it was a great song. It's wild. So now at this point, now we've been around long enough. We have a team of people that are always looking for locations. And now at this point, they just say, this is where we're going. Go write it. And then I dig into the research, the history, find out everything I can possibly find out about what happened, where, and when, and then who's going to come on and share their stories about having experiences in these places, or who's related to whatever events took place there. It's been an adventure for sure.
Because I mean, you think about how many episodes, I don't know how many's out there, but I mean in the hundreds.
No, I think it's like 260, 70
Yeah.
something now. I mean, it was 8 episodes, Misty. It was just supposed
Right.
to be 8.
You
I'm
know.
tired.
So I mean, you did like Bobby Mackey's, and then just so many, different places. Now, is there a place that you've wanted to have on the show that you haven't got to do yet, or has you
Sure.
just yeah?
Yeah, there's always a bunch. Some just simply won't allow it.
Hmm.
And I get that. I get it. One place that's come up multiple times, it'll never ever happen, but gotta be great if it did, is the White House, right? I mean,
Yes, I have
it,
that on my list to talk about. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the White House would be incredible, but there's only one paranormal person that really ever got inside there, and I was probably a fluke, I guess. But yeah, no, we've called and said, hey, is there any way? And they didn't laugh at us. I would have laughed at us if I worked for the White House and someone called and said, "Can we come film our ghost show? You know, run around the White House looking for ghosts." I'd be like, "Bah ha 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 ha!" Click. You know, they were cordial enough, but they're just like, there's no possible way. Like we could secure a room for you
Mm,
to conduct like an interview, and that's like on the first level and whatever, you know. But
right.
run of the house, God no. And it turns out the only way to get upstairs is by invite of the first family only. Like that
Wow.
space is protected like you wouldn't believe. Because I mean, if you think about it, and this is why I won't run for president, Misty. I won't do it, no matter how many people ask, which
I
to
know
date
I've
is
tried to
like,
push you into it, but you just won't.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. I
Yeah.
won't do it. So like that job is awful, and you live in a fishbowl. And so the staff works so hard to make sure that your only sense of normalcy is like when you go upstairs, when you leave the first floor where the east and west wing are, where the offices are, where the big ballroom and stuff, when you go upstairs to the living area, second and third floor, like that's another world. They want you to be sealed off. No one bothers you unless you want to be bothered. No one goes up there unless you want them up there. And of course, that's how it has to be. I can't imagine any president being like, "Yeah, let's come film Ghost Adventures. Come run around the Lincoln bedroom. Go through my sock drawer. I don't care." It would
The
be,
sock
yeah,
drawer.
right.
Yeah, of course.
That's the most haunted drawer. Everyone knows that. Thank you, Misty. Thank you. You get it.
Right, I do. So like Abraham Lincoln, is reported to be there. Who else?
The
Just
cat.
like
There's
the cat. Yes.
Dolly Madison. There's a lot of historic figures that seem to, pop in and out. Lincoln is by far the most prominent and the most famous, because he's an icon. You know
Sure.
what I mean? He's royalty. He's as closest we have. Like him and Washington really
Hmm.
are the closest we have to royalty and deities, really. I mean, Lincoln's another level. And I was thinking about that probably because Lincoln. So by the way, the one paranormal guy that ever got inside was me.
Oh, okay.
And that was back, oh God, what year was that? So I got in, it was dumb luck and smooth talking. I was working on a children's book called Who's Haunting the White House. And I called the main number, the switchboard, the number that's listed on the
Yeah.
website. And I said, "Hey, I'm an author that's working on a children's book about the ghost of the White House, and I was hoping to speak with someone about a possible interview." No joke. Person on the other line went, "Huh, hmm, hold on a minute." And
What?
like 30 seconds, I was talking to the boss.
What?
The boss isn't the president. The boss is the chief usher.
Hmm.
That's the person that about 100 employees report to. That's the butlers, the cleaning crew, the groundskeepers, all those people that run that building. Doesn't matter which political party's in power. They've been there for years and years and years, and they'll be there after. And he said, "Yeah, ghosts, yeah, we're not really interested." And I said, "No, but we're going to use ghosts as kind of an innovative way to teach history to kids, because you can't know who a ghost is unless you know who the person was and you set the stage and so on." And when he said, "All right, go on," I went,
Mm.
"All right."
You got him.
I got him. So I
Yeah.
had to do a background check. I had to get sponsored by my rep, my
What?
elected official,
Yeah.
regionally, and I got to go down there and interview Gary Walters, who at the time was the chief usher, and I talked to some of the staff and got a tour of the first floor. Again, I was reminded, like, no, there's no way anybody gets upstairs,
Mm.
and it was amazing. Like the staff there are so apolitical, as you would imagine. Like
Hmm.
they probably don't watch CNN, Fox News. They don't watch any of it, nor should anyone, by the
I
way.
was gonna say
Yeah,
I'm with them. Yeah.
yeah, don't watch any televised news. You'll be the least informed person on earth. But they're incredible historians. They're passionate about their country and what they do and how they serve it. And they've had ghost stories, and they'll talk about them. Who cares? They can't be fired. You can't fire them. You know what I mean?
You're
These are folks that have, and here's the other thing. Presidents have talked about seeing ghosts in the White House,
right.
but presidents can be crazy, on drugs, insane. We don't background check them. We don't do anything, right? We just vote and they get in.
Right.
But the staff are drug screened and tested and psych evaluated every which way, because they're around the president and foreign heads of state and first family and so on. And so if one of those folks says, "I saw a ghost," that's as reliable a witness as you will ever get. And I remember the Tony Savoy, the White House chief operations foreman, talking about how his duties in the morning were to go upstairs and turn the lights on the second floor and water the plants. And he did. And right in front of the Lincoln bedroom, he saw President Abraham Lincoln sitting on a chair with his legs crossed and his
Oh,
hands resting on his lap. And he looked at him and then disappeared. And I'm like, that's Lincoln.
wow.
He's on our money. We know
Yeah.
what he looks like.
Right.
Grab a
Yeah.
fiver, grab a
Right.
penny,
Right.
like that's, he's distinct. And he had this experience and he talked about it. They can't fire him for it. You know what I mean? It was just, hey, this happened, and they didn't doubt him, and they went, yeah, you're not the only one, and let's go down with our duties. And I loved how matter of fact they were about ghost experiences and what's supposed to be among the most secure buildings on Earth.
They do all the work for you. You didn't have to like do any research or nothing. They done did the drug testing for you and just
That's right.
bam, here they go. Now let's talk about your first paranormal experience. I think it was in the catacombs in Paris.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd been writing about ghosts. I started writing about ghosts in 1997. It was about, yeah, 97. And then I started a website called ghostvillage.com in 1999 to sort of as a repository for some of my writings there. Still hadn't seen what I would say. I mean, I had weird experiences, but nothing that I thought was like that, if that's a ghost. So it was 2003, and I was in Paris, France, and I was there for in a whole other work capacity, and I had a free afternoon. And so some of my colleagues were like, "Oh, we're going to the Louvre to see the museum or whatever." And I said, "Yeah, I'll catch up with you." And I went to the Catacombs, which is this network of tunnels below the city of Paris. There's just hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. And I went down, and it's deeper and deeper, and it's so quiet, and you can just hear the water dripping through the limestone. And I was making lefts and rights, and I knew what was supposed to be down there, but I didn't know where until I came to a doorway that said in French, "Stop. This is the Empire of the Dead." And I walked through, and there's just millions of skeletons all around you, and these like stacked up patterns, hallways with arm bones and leg bones and skulls. Just they're right there. You could touch them. There's no plexiglass or anything. It's just all around you. And back in the mid 1700s to 1800s, they had moved all the bones down there when they were emptying out the cemeteries. And as I was alone and in this long straightaway of bones, and I saw what looked like a man just step from one side to the other and back. And I froze. I thought, okay, maybe there was a side tunnel up there and
Hmm.
someone had passed through, but nope, it was the straightaway all the way to the end. And I didn't ask for this. I'm not psychic. This doesn't happen to me all the time. But in that moment, I was there and it happened. And it took a while to fully sink in. It took days, weeks, and so on. But I mean, and I went back. I went back years later to the same spot. And I was like, all right, here I am. Come on out. Right. I'm back.
Right.
But nothing happened that second time. And then I even thought about like my name and connections, right? To me, a ghost is the most simple definition of a ghost is a connection, right?
Hmm.
Connection to the past, connection to another person or another event or something, but it's a connection. And I thought about my last name, which I do pronounce Belanger,
Not Belanger.
but when I'm in France, it's Belanger.
Yeah.
That's right. The
Right.
Creole, you could, yeah, I
Well,
guarantee.
well, I was going to do
So
a disclaimer and say you are not related to Michelle Belanger.
Belanger, no, we've known each other forever and ever.
She's
And
great.
yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
And we joke all the time. Like our Twitter exchanges often go like this. Someone will be like, "Hey, Michelle," or "Hey, Jeff." It could go either way. Are you related to? Are you married to? Are you whatever? And I always write back and I'll be like, "That's my wife and sister." And then in parentheses, we're a very close family. And and then she writes back like, "No, we're not related, but he does look like some of my brothers. So who knows? Maybe far enough back." And anyway, she's great, and we talk from time to time, but no relation as far as either of us knows.
Right. She was a guest on our show here a couple of
Hmm.
months back, and it's just amazing and so talented and gifted and just wonderful. Now, you were saying that, you're not psychic or
Oh, right.
anything.
So my last name over in France, I
Right.
really do pronounce it Belanger because otherwise they'll look at me funny. It's a super
Sure.
common name in France and like Canada. And so I was like, now I'm a mutt at this point. My family tree is, all kinds of folks from all kinds of places. Been in America for like 4 generations now. And so but over there I was like, my DNA is down here in these bones somewhere. Some fragment. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah, like there's got to be I mean millions of people. There's got to be some DNA strands that connect to me. And who knows, right? And I always think I don't believe that there are ghosts in a vacuum. If there's a haunted house 100 miles out in the woods and nobody is there, I don't think it's haunted. I think you need a living person in the mix somewhere to establish that because if a and I know this sounds really like egocentric, and I get it, like the old adage, right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? I have an answer to that. And my answer to that is it doesn't matter. It
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
matter if it makes a sound, because if a living person isn't there to hear it, witness it in some way, then the sound is totally irrelevant, which I know is so human centric, egocentric. I get that, and I feel the same way about ghosts. Even if you put a camera in a building and let it roll, you're there. You're there by proxy with
Mm-hmm.
the camera. You know what I mean? Even if you're not in there, with your body. So I think that uh, a ghost is a message and it's a connection. And there's no point in sending a message if there's nobody there to receive it.
Now, I did like your a quote that you have on your Facebook. It says, "A ghost is history demanding to be remembered."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so. I once wrote an entire book trying to define what a ghost is, and I'll just save everybody a few bucks, right? Like, it's history demanding to be remembered. It's the past coming to the present. I think anytime history leaves a mark, that we can't help but tune into it, and sometimes it's a mark, sometimes it's a scar, sometimes it's a stain. Think about like Civil War battles, think
Mm-hmm.
about mass murders, anything like that leaves a mark. And we're human beings, and we can't help but tune into that because they were human beings and they went through something profound. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think that, like, well, that could have been me. I mean, when you stand in Gettysburg, and you think about all the people that died, back in July of 1863, that could have been you in another time and place. You could have been called up. Hey, we're all going. You're going too. Let's go.
All
Grab your
right.
rifle. We're all gonna march. And that's where you could have died. And you can't help but think about just how short life could be, and how those folks were they were doing that because they believed in something bigger than themselves. And today we live in a time where they tell us how politically divided we are. You probably got the memo, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
on the
you've
daily.
heard. Yeah, on the daily someone tell, oh, we're so divided, America's so
Right.
divided. Please, America, I'm calling a meeting. We all have to meet at Gettysburg. All of us, all of America, we're going to meet right there at Gettysburg. And I want all 40,000 plus that were dead, missing, or wounded back in July of 1863, all those ghosts, Confederate and Union, I want them to rise up from the ground, look at all of us, and in a single voice be like, oh, is America divided?
Yeah.
Oh, y'all yelling at each other on the internet? What's wrong, Cupcake? You need a hug?
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's not, that's divided. Gettysburg is what division looks like. Fighting on the internet? God, get over ourselves. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Apples
We've
and
gotten
oranges.
soft.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson. That's why Gettysburg should haunt us forever and ever. That's why Lincoln said we cannot hollow these grounds. It's been done far beyond our ability to add or detract. And he said that, shoot, very shortly after the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And here it is all these decades later, and it's still as true and relevant today. You want to know what division looks like? Go to any Civil War battlefield. That's what division looks like.
Right.
Let that haunt you, and then realize, like, we're bickering over like two or three issues, and it's stupid. Like, there's we agree on like 95% of stuff. You know,
Right.
and we just find a couple of things that divide us, and it's our stupid politicians that are fueling that fire. But we're dumb for listening to them.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Now, I know that your time isn't spent always about the paranormal and researching and doing your podcast. Now, you also wrote a book and you are a mountain climber and you conquered Kilimanjaro.
Yeah,
Kilimanjaro.
yeah.
Yes.
So that was so I love to get out and explore stuff. I mean, and I love to hike, and I always did. I did, after college and stuff. It was always liked hiking mountains. And Kilimanjaro had been on my bucket list really since right after college. It's the tallest mountain in Africa. It's not a technical climb, meaning you're not hanging by ropes and stuff. Like, there's a path if you can just get yourself up to 19,341 feet, if you're keeping
Easy.
score.
Right.
Yeah. It's like where planes fly.
Yeah.
And and so it had called to me for a long time. And but the impetus was when I had lost my brother-in-law to cancer. He was just a few years older than me, and he and I got pretty close because cancer took about 2 years to kill him. The diagnosis came out of nowhere. I mean, it was one day, he'd been losing some weight, and his doctor called him and said, they ran some tests, and doctor called and said, "Hey, Chris, whatever you're doing," and he was at work. He was a school principal. Said, "Whatever you're doing, just stop. Come down to my office right now. Just get down here as fast as you can."
Mm,
And he knows that ain't good. I mean,
right.
doctors don't ever do that.
No.
And then he gets there and he learns, like, "Hey, you've got stage 4 cancer. It's metastasized all over, and you've got 18 to 24 months to live." And he had a at the time 3-year-old son, and my nephew and my sister, and we were all just like, "What?" And my sister sort of like went into denial, but he and I got so close just because he's like, "Hey man, you're into some weird stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's
Mm,
fair, right?" And he said, "I'm going through something pretty weird." And I said, "Yeah, you are. We're not supposed to know when death is coming. That's not the natural order of things." But we talked a lot, and near the end, especially the last few months, at some point he had to be hospitalized because his organs were just failing. And he called me from the hospital and he said, "I got to tell you something crazy that happened last night." He said, "I was in bed and suddenly I was like 10 feet above my body looking down at myself." And I went, "Oh, well, what happened?" And he said, "I'm afraid of heights. I got scared and it was over." And he said, "And 10 feet doesn't make any sense. The ceiling wasn't 10 feet. I was like, the perspective was higher than what it really even could have been." And I said, "Yeah." And I've heard stuff like that before.
mhm.
And then the next day he called again. He goes, "Oh, it happened again." And then
Wow.
it was happening more and more. And it wasn't scaring him so much. He was at peace with it. He wasn't trying to make anything happen. And then it was December, and the doctor finally said those words, that are coming, where he's just like, "Hey, there's nothing more we can do. It's time to go home to hospice care." And when he got his hospital bed situated in his house, my family, we live in Massachusetts. He lived in Connecticut. We drove down, and that's not a visit. You know what that is,
Yeah.
when we were driving down. So we walked into the room, and it was actually pretty amazing because the room was in a corner, the corner of the house, and there was a window on either side of him, and the sunlight was kind of coming in, and he was glowing this absolutely golden color. And my cerebral brain said, "That's jaundice, bad jaundice. Like, his organs are failing. He's yellow. He's yellow from not being able to get the toxins out of his body." But he was glowing, and uh he was really at peace with what was happening. And we spoke for like 3 hours, and we talked about everything. And I said, "Are you still having the out of body experiences?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "But now I'm seeing things." And I said, "What do you mean seeing things?" He said, "Well, I saw my cat from childhood." He said, "Which is weird." He said, "I didn't even like that cat."
Ugh.
And then he said he saw his grandma. And I said, "Oh." And he was close with his grandma. And I said, "What do you think it means?" And he said, "The best I can figure is that there's something inside this broken, busted machine that's getting ready to break out and stay out." And yeah, I hugged him, and I did not say goodbye on purpose. Um, just said, "Love you." And then he died a few days later. And he said he wanted me to tell my sister and tell others. So I did. And about 2 months after that, I was doing an event, a paranormal event. It was a fundraiser. And a friend of mine from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society was there. And I'd done stuff for them in the past. Um, and she said, "Hey, Jeff, we got this fundraiser coming up." And I was like, "Oh, Amy, I'm so busy. I got so much going on." But, she's like, "We're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro to help raise money to fight cancer." And it was like
Wow.
the record scratched in the movie,
Hmm.
everybody froze in place but me and her. And I was like, "Kilimanjaro?" Uh, I took 2 semesters of Swahili in college for the
Oh,
weirdest reasons, but like that's the native language. I'm like, that's been on my bucket list. Chris just died. I'm like, raise money for cancer. He was just a couple years older than me. And I don't know how many times the universe holds something out on a golden platter for you.
right.
But in my experience, it isn't that often. And I just looked at her and I said, yeah, that's happening. I'm going to do that. And I trained. I was put together with 5 other strangers that none of us knew each other from New England. All of us, working for the same cause. And it was amazing. It was life-changing. It felt like such a well-needed break, and it was so deeply spiritual to go over there. Number one, boy, I can't recommend this enough. Shut off all your technology for like it takes 6 days to get to the top, right? So
Oh,
shut off all your technology for 6 days. Just do that. No emails, no phone calls, no texts, nothing. Um,
well, I don't know about that.
yeah, that's what
That would
people say,
be,
but
yeah,
yeah, but once you and by the way, I hate camping. It's not my idea of a
yeah.
good time. But there's no other way. And so like after the first day, you get the jitters, like, what if there's an emergency? There's absolutely no way to get in touch? Um, but then a couple of days of that, and you realize you're only existing to walk, to hike, to get to the next camp, to eat, to sleep, and keep moving. And by the time I got to the top, the Chaga people that live around that mountain have a word for the summit that means basically like the house of God, because they believe only those that God deems worthy are allowed up there. And
Mm.
when we left base camp at it was midnight because it was going to take 8 hours to get to the top from base camp. Base camp was like 15,500 feet or something, and we're going to 19,000, and it's only 3 miles, but it's going to take 8 hours to go 3 miles. And and it is so exponentially hard to breathe at that altitude. Once you get above 10,000 feet, like every 1,000 feet is so much harder. And at 16, 17,000 feet, it's the coldest I've ever been in my life. And I have been in cold. I live in New England, man. I've been in 60 below, like at a ski mountain. I know what that's like with a wind chill, 60 below, and I was colder up there. My water froze, like my water bottle froze, like everything is just
Wow.
awful and cold and dark and breathing. You know those little straws you get at the diner to stir your coffee,
Yeah, yeah. Little
Take
swizzles.
one of those straws and just breathe through it. Now jog, breathing through just that. That's how much air
Uh,
you get.
oh
And
no.
so your only option is to slow down, way down. And so that can, that's what it's so hard to breathe. And I wasn't sure I was going to make it. At some point, like every voice in my, I always got a dialogue going in my head. It's constant chatter up there. But around 3 in the morning, those voices went quiet. And I thought, well, that's either really bad or really good. And I still don't know. But everything got quiet and I thought, all right, I'll just a little further. But then around 4:30 or 5, I could look way out on the distance and see just this little glow on the horizon. And I realized that was the sun coming up. And then we got, a little bit brighter every 15 minutes, a little bit brighter, more light, more light. And then as soon as we got to the rim of the volcano, about 18,000 feet or so, I turned around and the sun had just broken up above the clouds, and we're way above the clouds at this point. And I was just so overwhelmed by the experience. I felt I felt right there that like I'm worthy and that I'm gonna make the top. That's done. And I felt Chris with me in that moment. And it was I know it doesn't make any sense. And if you knew him in life, he'd tell you he'd be the last guy on earth to go up there. He was not an athletic person at all, but I felt him right there with me, smiling. And it was just so overwhelmingly emotional and spiritual and profound. And I will never ever forget it. And I took a picture of it, and I've had it made into a big print that hangs on my wall. I've given it away as postcards, and it was life changing. And that wasn't even the top. The top was like just getting the trophy after. You go, you finally get there, it's like yay, and then you got to go because you can't breathe. It's just too hard to breathe up there.
Mhm.
But right there, that sunrise was so incredible. So it was the most spiritual thing I've done. And and I got to bring that experience home and be that guy that's slightly different than I was when I went over there, and bring that experience into everything I do paranormally. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, because I'm not the kind of guy that wants to sit around and with a bunch of tech and sit in the dark and look at EMF meters and stuff. That's just not my idea of a good time. That's not what I do. But it was so deeply spiritual that I sort of brought that to it. When I came back, I was like, oh, right, it's not just about chilling ghost stories and looking for evidence of the hereafter. It's something much bigger. And so for that, I'll be forever grateful for that mountain.
Now you were saying that Chris was with you. You felt him on. Do you still feel him now, or has he? You think
I don't,
crossed all
like,
the way
so
over?
yeah, no, so I don't I don't buy into earthbound spirits. You know what I mean? I don't buy that someone's stuck here. And the reason for that is I've never found a place that's haunted all the time. If I did, I would buy it and I would charge you a fortune to come in. I would just be like $20 to look, $100 to go in for 10 minutes. Like, it would be brutal. I'd be printing my own money. But I've never found a place where you could open the door and go, "There's the ghost, wave, hello," right? Like, I've
Right.
never seen that. I believe spirits come and go at for reasons we may not ever fully understand. And Chris, my nephew, his son is out. He has two kids from a previous marriage too. If I were him, I'd want to still look after my family. That
Sure.
wouldn't end. My sister hasn't been the same. She's still grappling with stuff. And this was, what was it, 2018 that he passed? Or 2016. 2016. God, it's been 8 years.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? When you lose someone close to you, life never goes back to normal. It goes to a new normal.
Hmm.
And we all know that. Anybody who's ever lost anybody close, that's the deal. Like, it's you'll never be the same. You
Right.
will go on, and there'll be happy days too, but there's a piece of you missing. And I think that, especially folks that were close to us, I think they check in from time to time, because I would. If I
Sure.
can, I will.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what I would do. And so I have not felt him like I did on the mountain. But I have no doubt, man. I remember being at, like, my nephew's football game, and, like, going to some of his events and stuff, and being there to support him, and like, I'm like, Chris is here somewhere too. Like, it'd be weird if he wasn't.
I have really enjoyed you being, getting to talk with you about all your wonderful adventures and what's coming up new for you. You got anything in the hopper?
Yeah, so I literally today finished a book, but
Ah,
there's no point really telling you about it. It's not going to come out till September of 2025.
okay.
So these things take time. So I'm always still working on new episodes of Ghost Adventures. In the fall, I've got a story tour that I always do, mainly up here in the Northeast, but I'll be at various events around the country too. But that's my favorite thing, is being in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
I like writing books. I like working on Ghost Adventures, but when you get to share these stories in front of a live audience and see and feel the reaction, there's nothing better than that. So that's coming up this fall, as it does every fall, and it's I'm blessed, right, that I get to do this for my full-time job, and that so many people share their stories and their experiences with me, that it creates the next tale, the next adventure.
Yeah, it's pretty badass to be able to get to do that. You, like you said, just blessed. And, I hope you'll join us again, maybe as it gets
Sure.
closer for the book. And we really appreciate it. So, everyone, my journey continues as I try to find out more about the paranormal. And I will see everyone next week. Have a good night.